If you have specific issues that you need addressed by California Department of Veterans Affairs, you're welcome to contact us directly, womenveterans@calvet.ca.gov. In the meantime, we like to keep any questions or comments you have regarding our presentation relevant to the topic at hand. You can use our chat window, and you can ask a question, and I'll monitor the chat window, and we can have a dialogue there. I can bring questions to our guest speaker or to any of you, and then I can also answer questions through the chat window. You're also welcome to do that through the phone line because many of you are joining via phone and via the webinar. So if you have questions for our guest speaker today, Gayle, I'll ask that you ask those questions at the end. And so this call will go till about 11 o'clock, so we'll reserve the last probably 15 or 20 minutes for questions after Gayle finishes up with the main part of her discussion, and we talk a little bit about the book and things like that. So we'll go ahead and get started. So it is my pleasure to introduce Gayle Tzemach Lemmon. She is the author of Ashley's War. This is the untold story of a team of women soldiers on the Special Ops battlefield, particularly women who were part of cultural support teams in Afghanistan, helping Special Operations soldiers find insurgents and get relevant information for the mission on the ground. Gayle is a senior fellow for the Council on Foreign Relations. She writes frequently in different publications about issues relating to women, to women's empowerment and entrepreneurship, among many other topics. If you research her name on the internet, you can find many of the different articles and pieces that she's done. She's also the New York Times best-selling author of The Dressmaker of Khair Khana, which is about women in Afghanistan who thrived making dresses and really creating their own businesses. So we'd like to welcome Gayle to the conversation today and give her the chance to talk a lot about the evolution of creating this book and the characters and individuals that she met while doing it. So Gayle, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you. We have a little bit of a webinar, some PowerPoint slides that go with this that just show the cover of the book as well as yourself, and a few photos about the cultural support
Wonderful.
And the women that were doing them. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, I mean, it is a privilege for me to join all of you. Thank you. Please let me know if my connection gets lousy. I'm in the very developing world city of Los Angeles right now, where somehow my cell service, if I move an inch, tends to change. So thank you all for everything you do and for letting me join you. I will say I was a new arrival to this entire conversation as somebody who covered Afghanistan, but I did not necessarily know the intricacies of some of the women in combat conversation. I knew a lot about the issue broadly, but I hadn't spent a lot of time really embedded in it until a former Marine, Claire Russo, told me about, in 2012, a first lieutenant, First Lieutenant Ashley White, who had been on night raids alongside the Rangers in 2011. And I said, well, wait a minute, wasn't the combat ban in place? And there were a couple of female Marines who were there who looked at me as if to say, boy, you really just don't know a thing, kind of a bless your heart kind of expression, and said, they just started to laugh and said, that combat ban doesn't mean a thing. Come on. And, I kind of known that because I'd come in and out of Afghanistan a lot for the Dressmaker book and had the privilege of spending time with some amazing people for that story. But I hadn't really thought through what the combat ban meant and didn't mean. And really, I had then, through Claire Russo's mention, stumbled across a story that would really change me and to give me the opportunity to put a flashlight on the community that all of you are a part of and really try to bring it to people who just don't know that women have been doing these kinds of roles for years, and that there is a whole generation of women upon whose shoulders they stand, and that they are paving the way for so many who come behind them. And it's really the ultimate story of female friendship in the least likely of places. a story of Cultural Support Team 2 that was recruited from across Army Guard and Reserve in 2011, as you all know better than I, while the combat ban was in place, to go out on special operations missions with Rangers, SEALs, and other special operations teams. And what I wanted Ashley's War to do was to show a world that most readers don't know. Women who will be forever bound to one another by friendship and the unbreakable bonds of war that in pop culture we've really only ever seen men share. Because the thing that strikes you about spending an evening with 8 or 9 or 10 of these women is that they are each other's best friends, family, baby shower hosts, divorce therapists, career counselors, priests, rabbis, confessors. I mean, they're the people they call at midnight and the people they text at 5 a.m. and the people who are at one another's weddings and funerals. And we've never, as a country, gotten to see women share that kind of a bond because so often they're in ones and twos as part of a larger story. And what I wanted Ashley's War to be was simply a war story that had women soldiers in it. There were people who were disappointed, I think, on both sides that it wasn't more political. But as you all know better than anybody, your service isn't political. It's about service. And I wanted this book to show that this was simply about a group of Americans who, when America said, we need women out on this battlefield because American men cannot talk to Afghan women. We have a real security gap that we're facing here because we don't have women out here seeing the kind of combat experienced by less than 5% of the entire United States military. We are missing things. And that is what I wanted this story to show, which is show why they ended up out there, what they were doing there, who wanted them there, and the fact that this changed their lives forever. And it was really this all-star band of women I could never have made up as a storyteller if I tried. And what I've tried to do justice to in this book is to take readers into this world of women who will forever be connected, not only by what they saw and did at the tip of the spear while women officially were banned from combat, but by the fact that America had no idea about you and about them and about the fact that they were out there every single night seeing this kind of war, and that we as a country had no idea even that they were there, so how could we welcome them back properly? So I wanted this to be a war story and a story of friendship, a story of valor about what motivates you to serve, to raise your hand not once but twice, to be part of really building a plane in mid-flight, which is what these women were, right? They brought them to Fort Bragg. They were recruited in March or May, went through selection then, right? More than 200 women applied. About 55 are chosen. And after what a selection process called 100 Hours of Hell, which is documented and asked before. And then by August, these women are seeing the kind of combat experienced by special operators who've had years of training, and at least 1 year in the case of Rangers and far more in the case of Special Forces. So I would definitely love your questions. I'd love to have a conversation. I do want to make clear I am very aware these were not the first women to ever do this job, and the book is very clear about that this had been going on for years to fill the security gap. There were women who were mechanics, women who were, medics who had been pulled, and in fact, Ashley's hallmate in Kandahar was a medic who one day her commander said, hey, do you want to go get bad guys? And a couple of weeks later, she was out with Rangers on night raids. So I wanted this book to show this story. And I also wanted to show one last thing before I turn it over to you, is the and. That so many times we don't see women in all their dimensions on a page or in a film. And this was about women who loved cross-fit and cross-stitch. Women who love to wear, fat body armor and march for miles, and who also love to wear mascara. Right, and one did not make them less serious than the other, and it was about embracing the and. Ashley White was somebody who loved to make dinner for her husband, who was her Kent State ROTC sweetheart, who always pushed her to be her best, and she loved to go to the gym and bust out 30 pull-ups from a dead hang, and I wanted America to see that too. that women embrace the and every single day, and we do not talk enough about that, and we don't get to see ourselves in those dimensions often enough. And I do hope that Ashley's War does its part. And as the final story is that Ashley's killed on a night raid in 2011 alongside two Rangers, Christopher Horns and Christopher DeMay. And at her funeral, her parents had not known what she was doing. And they found out at Dover. And she had wanted to protect them, and also it was such an experiment, she didn't know how much she could tell them. So at Dover, they find out. The head of Army Special Operations Command comes to her funeral, and in a speech that is in Ashley's War, says, make no mistake about it, these women are warriors, and they have written a new chapter in what it means to be a female in the United States Army, the finest army on the face of this world. The Ranger leaders give a speech about them, read The Man in the Arena, the Teddy Roosevelt, and they say this is written for a man, but it applies to this fallen female soldier. Ashley White, know that your brothers will be out there in your honor. So, I mean, the head of Army Special Operations, they come and they give testament to what these women have been doing and how much of a difference it made on the battlefield. But at the end of this, a woman comes up to Mrs. White, to Ashley's mother, and Mrs. White still doesn't know who she is. But she came up to her and said, Mrs. White, I brought my daughter here today because I wanted her to know what a hero was. And I wanted her to know that heroes could be women, too. And for me, sharing Ashley's War has been a journey, an education, and a privilege to try to show the Anns and to show who these women really are and were and why they will be forever bound to one another and what it is that motivated them to answer. And again, as I said, the ultimate story of female friendship in the least likely place. So thank you so much.
Gayle, thank you so much for the introduction to Ashley's War. Gayle and I have been talking for the last week or two about the book, about the role of women in the military, and how women are portrayed in the media, and what that does for those of us that have served, how that affects us when we come home. And I think, and I've read Ashley's War now, and can say that it's a very honest account and a very true account of what women go through while serving in the military, based on conversations I've had with women in similar roles, as well as an incredible story of female friendship and heroism. And I think the book really, really highlights several themes that we consistently talk about in the veterans community and that we have to continue to talk about. Policy does not match reality. Over and over again in this book, you find women who are really just making things up as they go when it comes to the actual operations they're engaged in with these special operations teams. They had a crash course in special operations tactics and were able to pick up as much on-the-job training as they possibly could, but the reality is that they weren't trained in the infantry. They weren't trained to do these things in any specialized manner outside of a very quick course and some lessons from some highly trained individuals. That over and over again has been the theme of women serving in Iraq and Afghanistan, in particular these two wars, because they found themselves over and over again on that ever-moving front line that really has no definition, and have had to buckle down and make it up as they go, and they've done remarkably well. We've lost close to 200 women in Iraq and Afghanistan, U.S. military women in Iraq and Afghanistan, many of whom were killed in action and killed by the actions of the enemy. And all of them were putting their lives on the line, demonstrating true heroism. And I think that's another thing that this book highlights. Gayle, I think you've done an excellent job of capturing the fact that this is a story about soldiers. This is a story about heroes. They just happen to be women. And that's what we, over and over again in the community that I talk to regularly, try and highlight and remember, that women are just as capable and just as much laying their lives on the line for the country as our male counterparts have done. And so I am very excited that this book is receiving praise and is receiving widespread attention. So far, you've probably been interviewed on how many networks? This book?
A lot. But and honestly, I tap dance for this book every single morning. I pitch. Now it's all me because we had a wonderful first pitch. For those of you who might have missed it, Diane Sawyer did Good Morning America, World News, and Nightline around the book. And then did Jon Stewart, and then almost everything else. A Good Morning Edition, Diane Rehm. And now, I had a Fox News piece this weekend. I'm pitching local NPR all the time. All of you who might have suggestions, please let me know. I mean, there's nothing. There's very little I won't do to get this book before people, because I promised the people in these pages that if they trusted me with the funniest moments of their lives, the most moving moments of their lives, and quite honestly, the most heartbreaking moments they will ever have, that I would do everything I could to get it to as many people as I possibly could. And that, is a mission I take very seriously.
Yeah, and it's very much appreciated. I know that women who are listening and those who have served on the ground in these missions, starting from the Lioness program and female engagement teams in Iraq, as you mentioned in the book, to women currently serving, are interested in this because we so rarely see our images up on the big screen, or so rarely see us represented as a whole complex character in movies and television as military service members. I have a few questions for you, Gayle, because I noticed some interesting things in the book that are also some themes that that I just found frankly fascinating. A couple of the women who took up the call to join these combat support teams, based on the poster they saw. So right now I'm sharing the poster on our webinar. It says, soldiers become a part of history. Join the U.S. Army Special Operations Command Female Engagement Team Program. Sounds like every woman in the book saw this flyer somehow and was incredibly moved by it and immediately pursued it. But some of the women that did take up the call had also experienced some very bad things in the military. A few had been raped or sexually assaulted, but still felt the need to serve in the military, probably partly because of the assault. Do you think?
Yes, I think there's definitely at least one, Lane, who was an Iraq War veteran, had ridden, she had driven convoys during Iraq. And basically, she had experienced military sexual assault at the hands of a soldier from another unit during her deployment, which had really ruined her attempts to return to normal life after her deployment, as you would imagine. She went to the VA. The VA said, well, you can't have post-traumatic stress because that's only from people who've seen combat. And then she basically started to self-administer whatever she could. And she has this moment where she finally tells people in her Guard unit what happened during a training video about acquaintance rape. And that sort of liberates her in some ways to move on with the healing process. And for her personally, part of what she was motivated by was a desire to prove to herself that she would never be a victim again. And she wanted to prove to herself that she could put herself in the toughest situation possible and she would be fine. And that is part of why. It's not the whole thing. She was, like all of these women, incredibly athletic, driven, motivated, and honestly, when they come to the Landmark Inn in one of the early scenes of Ashley's War, they had never been around women like them because, as you all know much better than I, so often women, they're in 1s and 2s and 3s in a much larger male unit. And here it was like 50 women in a motel breakfast room, just like them, fit and driven and motivated. And kind of ass kicking. And, that reinforced her desire to say, there's nothing that will keep me out of this. And you see that over and over again among these women.
Incredible. The women that are profiled in this book, folks, are from very, very different backgrounds. They're all different ranks. They held different positions in the Army. They were in the Guard. They were in the Reserves. They were active duty. And they all come from different parts of the United States. And yet they had some shared desire, not just to continue serving their country, but also to be some of the fittest, most athletic, and hard-charging people that could have ever taken up this call. I think just reading through the 100 Hours of Hell, where the women are put through the CST test course, I was tired just reading it. I was exhausted. I needed to take a nap. These women are just in absolutely incredible shape, and the ruck marches and the mental exercises that they were put through, the total exhaustion that they experienced is captured very well in the book. In particular, though, the beginning of the book really discusses some of the history and the evolution and the need for women in these roles, which over and over again, when I give talks to different groups about women who serve in the military, I emphasize the fact that women have never been in the draft. We have always picked up the call to serve voluntarily. And I think that's important because it shows the women who are serving in the military have a very strong commitment to do it and a very strong desire to be part of the team. And these women were certainly no exception to that. So every time throughout history of the United States military, every time that women have been asked to serve, they've answered the call readily. From serving, in the Revolutionary and Civil Wars dressed as men, from serving over 400,000 of them in World War II, to serving as nurses who were definitely exposed in Vietnam to some gunfire, to some major combat issues, as well as serving and supporting and saving the lives of so many Vietnam soldiers. Women have always been there to answer the call, and these women are certainly at the forefront of that now. Really remarkable. So, the case for women in combat. Gayle, do you feel like this book makes that case pretty well? Do you feel that what these women did can help support the women who are attempting to go through Army Ranger School and serving in all of the job occupations that have not previously been open to us?
I would ask you guys that, actually. I'll tell you what I wanted this book to do. There's so much conversation about what women could do and should do and are capable of and all of this, and so little conversation about what they've already done. And I wanted this book to reframe the conversation and actually inject some sex into the conversation and say, hey, people to have conversations about this as if it hasn't already been happening for years. And, from there, the policymakers, I have my own very strong views about this, but I purposely did not want this book to be about me or my views. I wanted it to be almost as if we could show a documentary about what these women did and how it changed them and what it meant for the men alongside whom they served, and to really take everything we thought we knew about women in combat and throw it as civilians, right? It's very divorced from the world that you inhabit, and throw it on its head and say, hey, America, this has been going on for a long time. So if you're going to have this conversation, at least have it in an informed way.
I think that's an excellent point, because you're right. Women have been fulfilling these roles for quite some time because of this ever-changing lines of battle, these ever-changing lines and places where war happens. There's just absolutely no way that you can expect for war and battle to go your way. and to call out the parameters and to know exactly how it's going to shake out, especially in these latest conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan, where guerrilla warfare was really the main approach that the enemy took in terms of how they fought. It has to be flexible, and it has to be ever moving, and so women couldn't help but be caught up in that, and they've been there for a long time. I remember when Jessica Lynch was taken as a POW in the early days of the invasion of Iraq, and how the media portrayed Jessica's role, and how, as I was serving active duty in the Navy and very close to the area of Iraq because we were supporting missions over the no-fly zones at that time, the conversation had a lot to do and surrounded her gender very regularly.
Oh, yeah.
I remember people not really classifying her as a POW, saying nothing about the other woman, Lori Pistowa, who died on that attack on their convoy. It was pretty interesting because it was not clearly stated. I don't recall early on that she was considered a POW. I know that it wasn't recognized by some of the fellow service members I spoke with, and I think that was a difficult place for America to find itself, having to suddenly realize that women were going to be taken, women were going to be killed and injured. I don't know that we were ready for it, and I don't know that we're ready for it still. I think that we still have these conversations.
Yeah. I mean, I think that that's right. I think that although, it's funny, though, because a lot of people will say, what about if women are taken as prisoners of war? And I said, well, women have been taken in World War II. They were also. And what do you think happens to men who are taken? Do you think they aren't sexually violated? Because clearly that's what the question is about. So, I mean, I've watched lots of war documentaries, and if you talk to some of the British men serving in Iraq and Afghanistan, they'll tell you that's their biggest fear. Mm-hmm. So, what I wanted Ashley's War to do was to get at some of the myths and some of the narratives, and through story, because I really believe that that's the only way you make change is, sort of the Will and Grace effect, right? Other people may see it differently, but what changed, I'm working on a piece on this, and you and I have talked about it, about portrayals, but what changed with gay marriage is legal battles, but that we're also confronted by pop culture showing that these people were not the other. They were us. And that is what I wanted Ashley's War to do, to show a hero story, could get behind it. And I'll say the thing that's been so moving is reader mail has been 6-to-1 men supportive. Incredible. And that women, in some ways, civilian women or women who are removed from the military almost seem more hesitant about a war story than men are. And I would love your thoughts on that. But that's been really fascinating for me to see.
Interesting. So you're saying that women are not as engaged with this as a war story, or not wanting to?
They are. I think they're just more hesitant. I think they are. I mean, we get a lot of mail from women. But I think women, for example, people who loved the Dressmaker book that I wrote about a young woman whose business supported her family under the Taliban, they'll write to me and say, I've never read a war book before. I don't know how I feel about that. And then once they pick it up, they'll have really, I think they're so moved by all of you. And because this is just one story that stands for so many others. But I think it is a leap for a lot of women in particular who just haven't necessarily engaged with a war story before.
Yeah, maybe because war fighting has been typically reserved in pop culture as the territory of men. And so even that part of the conversation has to change, where we start, just as we socialize our children from such a young age as clearly male or female, giving them the appropriate gender toys. I was in Toys R Us yesterday, and they had a whole section of toys really dedicated to replicating what kids can do in the home. They had blenders and little microwaves and ovens and dishwashers and washing machines. And wouldn't you know, all of those were in the section for girls' toys, not for boys' toys at all. There was they were not approaching this as a gender-neutral toy section. And so war fighting is clearly still in the territory of men. So maybe even having women think about stories of other women serving in war is still something we have to work on and talk more about among our communities and in the media, certainly.
And I do think that's changing. I really do. But I think that, it's an evolution, and it's also a generational question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very much so. Very much so. Do you think that this story could have been told without Ashley White as the central character?
No, because I don't think I would ever have known it. These women never, and I'm sure everyone on this call will nod in violently when I tell you, not a single one of them thought they had done anything at all exceptional. They would never have told me their story if it weren't Ashley White's family who said, we talked to Gayle, we trust her, meet her. And they didn't do more than that, but they made the introduction. And if they hadn't had, I think it would have been nearly impossible. I mean, really and truly, there were people who only talked to me because the Whites had. And then they would sort of warm up over time, because my job is to prove myself, right? My job is to say, look, I spent a lot of time in Afghanistan. In fact, I found out I was pregnant with my first child when I was finishing the dressmaker book reporting. And I know the smells, I know the sounds. I certainly don't know combat, but I know Afghanistan a decent amount. And, we would just talk about war and about being a woman in an unusual spot and why we love the work we do. And we would have lots of conversations about that. And then eventually I would say, look, I really this is not about you. This is now about something much bigger than any one of you. And I think they understood that as well by the end. But, not a single one did it talk to me because they wanted to be remembered. They talked to me because they didn't want their teammate forgotten.
Right. Amazing. Yeah, so much of it seems like Ashley White was an incredible woman, quiet but kind, dedicated to her teammates, dedicated to her family, and really to the mission at hand.
Well, she was so special, and people would say to you, reporting this was so heartbreaking and so inspiring exactly at the same time. This is a team story, but there's no question that Ashley's heartbeat runs through it.
Right.
And that's how I always thought, that she bound them together even more than they already did, and that they are determined to make sure she is never forgotten.
Of the 20 or so women that were selected for the cultural support teams in Afghanistan, they were deployed all throughout Afghanistan at the time. And so they all knew Ashley. And so the night that Ashley died, they all relayed the message to one another. It's a heartbreaking part of the book to read through that. And so Ashley was killed in 2011, in the fall of 2011, when her unit went out and they were searching a compound, and she was hit by an IED. There was a daisy-chained IED, so several members of the team were hit. And as you said earlier, Gayle, 2 of the other team members were killed, and many others injured, including her interpreter, Nadia.
That's right. That's right. Who I also, that was a very hard interview to get, because the interpreter also are so unsung, and she had not talked to anybody about what had happened that night. And our first interview, she really just sat and cried for probably an hour, because I think it was so much more than just that one night. It was everything. And it was the fact that she had come home to a country that had no idea what she had done, and that she couldn't talk to anyone about it anyway.
Right. And her family didn't support her work. She was in Afghanistan.
No, they were Afghan refugees who had found safe haven in the United States, and they couldn't imagine why their child would want to go back after they worked so hard to get out.
Right. Well, and as you read the book, the bonds between the women and getting to know more about their personalities and how they worked well together, it's just really wonderful. Along with the men that the special operations team members and the men in these units and some of the incredible mentors and trainers that were male that these women had along the way. Really supportive, wonderful people doing incredible work. So can you talk a little bit about the cultural support teams, how that evolved from kind of a point paper and a theory to actual practice in Afghanistan and a little bit prior to that in Iraq?
Absolutely. I mean, so this had started years earlier. Lioness program started in Iraq, really out of battlefield need, which is when male soldiers cannot talk to or search women and women are wearing rather large garments. And it started when the insurgencies got worse, that there were people wearing burqas who were either exploding things or themselves, tragically. And so you needed women to talk to other women, to search other women because of the way that the military was operating in these environments. And so the Lioness program, which has a great documentary about it, some of you might have seen, started taking mechanics and people who had nothing to do with infantry units or very little to do formally with infantry units and putting them on patrol. That starts to formalize it. That gives way later to the Marines with their female engagement teams in Afghanistan. None of these, by the way, had like long and comprehensive training processes by any stretch, right? And then there was this idea that Admiral Olson, who was the first SEAL to run Special Operations Command, had, that there was this yin and yang of warfare, and America was never going to kill its way to the end of these wars, and it needed more knowledge. And he had then the distinct impression that everybody, when he would share this idea, was simply waiting for the next SOCOM commander to come. But lo and behold, a couple months later, Admiral McCraven, another Navy SEAL, who would go on to be the head of Special Operations Command, puts in his request to have women go out alongside Rangers on combat operations. And once the JSOC commander puts in the request, it's very hard to say no. So that's in the spring of 2010. CST-1, which is a pilot program, most women taking from within the Special Operations community, goes out. CST-2 is the first time the recruiting posters go out, the emails go out. Women throughout the Army, Guard, and Reserve are brought in this very formal selection process to go through this selection process that we discussed, this 100 hours of hell. So it goes from idea to operational within a year or so, and through a lot of iterations in the meantime.
Yeah, absolutely incredible. I think this is an incredible example of when women can actually do a job, that men can't. And we talk so much about, are women, should they be in combat? Are they going to be able to be physically fit enough? Are they going to be able to do the number of push-ups? And, oh, my gosh, we can't lower our physical standards requirement. Can they spend this long in the field, in the middle of nowhere, taking dirt naps? I mean, is this possible that women can do this? And here is a job that only women can do, that is so vital to the mission and to operations in this part of the world. And so that's one thing I absolutely loved about the story of female engagement teams and these cultural support teams. They are such a special and important component of the work that needed to be done, and gathered an incredible amount of intel and saved lives, simply saved people's lives because of the work they did, because of what they learned from women and children, particularly the women in Afghanistan. Really, really incredible story. And there are other incredible stories of women who have served in the military. Like you said, Gayle, this isn't the first. These are not the first women to have served in these types of roles. We've been chronicling and writing about women who have served since World War II, roughly. But this is one of the books, I think, that really highlights personal stories of women serving, and is one of the first times that we see women specifically doing a job that men can't. And so I think that's one of the things that makes this a really, really special story. In addition to learning about incredible people like Ashley and her teammates. So at this time, if anyone has any questions for Gayle, she and I can keep talking because we've got about 15 more minutes for our call. But if anyone has questions, any of our participants would like to ask her something or ask me something, we'd love to hear from you all. And that's okay if we don't. I typically don't get a lot of questions asked on these calls. Instead, I ask the questions and then people usually chime in afterwards. So that's perfectly fine. You have some great reviews on the back cover of the book, including one from Sheryl Sandberg. We know as the COO of Facebook, author of Lean In, part of this Lean In movement. And I enjoy what she says because her quote is that the women who answered America's call to serve show that our military is stronger when it engages both halves of the population. I think that's so powerful because, we talk about women over and over again, in the military in particular, being part of the other. That translates to the veterans community, too. Women sometimes are part of the other. We go to our We go to our local post for the American Legion or the VFW or a veteran service organization, any of them, and are directed to join the auxiliary. We go to the local VA hospital or medical clinic, and we're addressed as sir or mistaken for a wife of a service member or a daughter of a service member. We still in the veterans community have to remember to openly recognize women as the soldier or the service member or the sailor or the Marine, not just the men. And I like that Sheryl Sandberg's take on this is showing that and kind of creating that great message around the fact that women are a major and important component of our armed forces and our veterans community. And this is something that needs to be highlighted. And so, go ahead. Please.
I would just like, I think that, for me, it's been such a huge opportunity to be part of calls like this and to share what I've seen. And, I always love to hear from you. Tell me your thoughts and what are we getting right and wrong, and does this kind of story make a difference for you? I truly hope it does. I've gotten so many beautiful notes. One of the young women in this book said to me at a North Carolina book event that this book gave her back her history because it was almost like they hadn't even done it once they got home because no one knew about it, and because it was a one-year rotation and it wasn't an actual military specialty, they were said, the special operations leader said, you did a great job. Now, you're all going back to your regular Army unit. And how do you ever go back after you've had that experience? For most of them, it was nearly impossible, and it was like it hadn't even occurred.
So you were able to offer a little bit of closure by telling this story for those women. One of our viewers is asking, have you done any follow-up with these women, and how are they handling transition back to the civilian world? I think that's a perfect question based on the comments you just made.
It's a wonderful question, and I'm in touch with them all the time. I saw some this weekend. Look, I think it's very difficult. What helps them is that they have one another. A lot of them have gotten out because there was nothing else they could do. Some of them are still within the special operations community in different roles, and they tend to be among the happiest. But they'll all tell you that the best thing they've ever done was this rotation with this 1-year deployment with one another in Afghanistan. And what I frankly think has been their saving grace is having one another. That has meant everything for them. And it's been a very hard transition for some of them, but knowing that they each exist has been, and that they can always reach out is what makes a difference.
Incredible. Well, that's certainly similar to what we hear in the veterans community. We all realize that nothing can replicate our military service. perhaps because of the specialized cultural nuances of serving in a specific unit or branch of the military. We all communicate with each other better than we do with civilians. And I think the more specialized a job you had and the more tense those situations or stressful those situations, I think the more that's even true, because people form very strong bonds in those times, in the most trying times in their lives. And we find that a lot of people have trouble transitioning back from the military, and that's got to be even more difficult when people can't talk about what they did or did something so specialized and kind of unique that they don't have a lot of people to relate to. To learn that these women are better supported when they have one another, it really resonates with me and I think with our listeners, because really a lot of us have found solace or friendship in the veterans community because we know we can talk to one another, and that's difficult to do with others. So another question, it says also from another Gayle. I guess we have a Gayle on the line. Do you travel to the Los Angeles area, and are you available to speak to women veterans groups?
I actually live in Los Angeles, and when I get to be home, and I would love to speak to women veterans groups. I'd love to bring the story there, and I'd love to hear from you. Absolutely. My email, is just it's just contact@GayleLemmon.com. That all goes to me and my assistant.
Okay, so the email again is, and I'll also type this in our chat window.
Sure.
Contact.
Yep. At GayleLemmon.com.
Contact@GayleLemmon.com. Wonderful.
Yep.
And so what's next, Gayle? Are you going to be continuing? Obviously, you're still promoting the book and working on this circuit. Will you be continuing to look at women in Afghanistan or women in the military, or can you not divulge that at the moment?
Well, I'm working on a couple things in a slightly new direction, but quite honestly, I have been so focused on getting this book out there because this wasn't just another project for me. I mean, in the same way that Dressmaker wasn't. These are stories that you want people to read because you want them to change the way they see their world. And it's a huge ambition for a little book, but that's what I want it to do. And I want people to see this issue in a new way. People who don't know you, right? They don't know veterans. Certainly they don't even know men who serve, let alone women. And so we'll see what's next after that. We did sell the film. We have been working on a potential film project. The film option was won by Fox 2000 and Reese Witherspoon and Bruna Papandrea, so I will be involved in that. But in terms of next projects, I'm giving myself kind of the next 3 to 4 months to finalize that, and I will definitely let you know.
Got it.
In the meantime, one other thing, if I might plug it, is I just did a TED Talk on the book and on this story, and I would really love for folks to share that if you're so moved, because that would just be wonderful, and I'd love to hear from you on it.
Okay, so we can contact Gayle for potentially doing a speaking engagement or more engagement regarding the book. She's in the LA area. Her contact is contact@GayleLemmon.com, GayleLemmon. She's got a TED Talk all about Ashley's War. You can find Ashley's War on Amazon.com. If you have Prime, it'll get to you within 2 days. That's how I got it. You can also check out the Council on Foreign Relations and get linked up to some of her work there. And now, Gayle, you did an LA Times op-ed recently. Yes.
Yeah, and that's all on my website, too. I think it's on the journalism section, too. It's just GayleLemmon.com.
Okay.
But just, I'm on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, all that stuff. so I'm pretty easy to to track down. A little tough only because I have 100 small children and a constant travel schedule, but I am definitely love to be in touch. Thank you for letting me come into your community. I take it very seriously. I understand that getting this wrong is actually worse than doing anything at all, than doing nothing at all, and I just appreciate you having me and helping to share this story because I want it to change people's hearts and minds in the sense of opening their eyes to all you've done already.
Well, I thank you very much, Gayle, and I know our listeners do too, and we will archive this on our website at calvet.ca.gov /womenvets. This and more to come for some great conversations we'll be having with folks in the future. Ashley's War is a fantastic book, and it's been an education for me, someone who served not in the Army but in the Navy, and while I was on active duty, had no idea that these things were going on the ground in places like Iraq at the time. And then obviously fast forward to the last few years now in Afghanistan. It is an education for all of us, even those of us that served need to know these stories and need to know the extent of the work that our sisters did in uniform. Incredible stuff. So please, folks, join us for our monthly call for the month of August, and that will be first Monday in August, again at 10 a.m., and we'll have a new topic for you. You're welcome to contact me, lindsay.sin@calvet.ca.gov, or contact Gayle if you have any further questions for us. And Gayle, I really look forward to seeing what's next for you, and I think it would be great to see an amazing movie come out of this too. So, so good luck to you, and we will see.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful, wonderful day and weekend, and thank you all for having me.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Gayle.
Bye.
Bye.